Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm coming to you once again from the UOS Sanctuary with important news that we are not supposed to greet each other this week with the traditional Shabbat Shalom like I just did. This, of course, is Shabbat Hagadol. And as such, there is a tradition that instead of greeting each other with Shabbat Shalom, we greet each other with Shabbat Hagadol U'Mivorach, the great and blessed Shabbat. May you have a great and blessed Shabbat. Why is that? What is so special about Shabbat Hagadol? The traditional understanding is that this was the time that Bnei Yisrael took a lamb and tied it to their home in preparation for the Karban Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice. And as the lamb was worshipped as a deity in Egypt, there was fear, concern that the Egyptians would punish the Jews for threatening to kill their deity, their God. Yet a miracle occurred, and the Egyptians did not harass the Jews for taking their God, the lamb. There are also some other interpretations. For example, it's called Shabbat Hagadol, the big or the long Shabbat, because people would stay in Shabbat for a longer duration of time in order to review the laws of Pesach and to talk about the miracles and wonders that happened when the Jewish people were being redeemed from Egypt. Others say it's called Shabbat Hagadol, the big Shabbat, because of the large crowds that would gather to hear the lectures about the laws of Pesach and the themes of the Haggadah and redemption. So it seems for us that this year our Shabbat Hagadol is going to be different than all other years, than all other times when we have celebrated Shabbat Hagadol. We will not stay in shul for longer periods of time in order to learn the laws of Shabbat. We will not gather as we traditionally do every single year with large crowds to come and hear about some of the themes of Shabbat. I got a call this week from a member of our congregation. He called for two reasons. He called first to say hello and check on me and see how I was doing. It was very sweet and deeply, deeply appreciated. And then he said, Rabbi, what about Yizkor this year? What are we supposed to do about Yizkor this year? And I'm sure that he's not the only person who has this question on their mind. And so I told him two things. I told him that, of course, it's okay to say Yizkor at home. And I invite everyone to do that if one is in a position where they should be saying Yizkor. And then I told him about our Zoom Yizkor, which is going to happen on Sunday after the first days of Pesach at 11 o'clock, and we'll send out information about that. But I also want to focus on this idea of what it means to say Yizkor at home or do other aspects of our religious life at home as we are no longer gathering in shul. And this comes from a different idea of why this is called Shabbat Hagadol. According to some, the reason why this week, this Shabbat is called Shabbat Hagadol is because the mitzvah of taking the lamb that Bnei Yisrael, that the Jewish people followed when they were in Egypt, and tying it to their house in preparation for the Pesach offering, the Karban Pesach, was the first mitzvah that Bnei Yisrael actually participated in, actually fulfilled. And in many ways, the fulfillment of that mitzvah mirrors our situation as well. If you recall, Bnei Yisrael were told, when it came to offering the Karban Pesach, Lo tetzu ish mipetach beito, that none of you shall go out of your house. There was literally a plague going on outside in the streets, and Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, were told that they had to stay inside. So they had to perform this mitzvah in their own homes, away from everyone else, separated from many of their loved ones. But yet it was so significant, that home-based mitzvah, that mitzvah that they were forced to do inside their homes, it was so significant that we call this Shabbat, which is the date on which that happened, the day in which that happened was Shabbat, that we call this Shabbat, Shabbat Hagadol, the great Shabbat, because that first mitzvah was performed in this way. It was not done in a public way. There was no grand gesture, but rather something that families did on their own in the privacy of their own home. I know that this continued self-quarantine and this continued social distancing is difficult. This is our fourth Shabbat, our third week, and I appreciate how difficult it is. And the call from the man who was concerned about Yizkor is really about that. It's about this concern about not being able to gather together to perform the mitzvot and to do the community things that we have come so accustomed to and that are so dearly and deeply beloved to us. But what we are taught about when we learn about this other reason for Shabbat Hagadol is that home mitzvot are very powerful. Shabbat Hagadol teaches us that Bnei Yisrael's introduction to mitzvot was not in a public place, but was in the privacy of their own home. Shabbat Hagadol reminds us that religious life really begins at home. Davening, praying at home, learning Torah at home, and of course doing acts of chesed. Normally we think acts of chesed are for the outsiders, but really chesed starts at home. Chesed begins with kindness, with patience, with flexibility as we find ourselves in very tight corners. So it is true, my dear friends, that we cannot come together this week for the traditional Shabbat Hagadol Drush. And I am sure, and this is true for me, that we miss each other. We miss being together. We miss sharing communal life with each other. But perhaps this is our time to hearken back to our origin story, to begin our Pesach period of time, which really begins with Shabbat Hagadol, the way that our ancestors did, focusing on the mitzvot that we could do at home, bringing Kedusha, bringing holiness into our homes and into our families. Even as this Shabbat Hagadol will be different, it can be one where we are full of gratitude for our family, for our health, for the knowledge that people care about us, and for the fact that even though we can't come together, we know that we are part of a community and we will get back to being a united and together community. So I will leave you now with the new way we are supposed to greet each other on this Shabbat Hagadol. Shabbat Hagadol u'mivorach. In your new sanctuary, which is your home, I wish you all a blessed and great Shabbat.